Are you struggling with sounding like a native speaker when you speak English? Are you one of those who have studied copious grammar and vocabulary but still have difficulty speaking fluently? Well, you are going to want to stick around for this podcast because I have some very practical tips that you may find useful. Hello, welcome to my podcast. A big shout out to all my subscribers and viewers who continue to support this effort. Guys, I am so amazed. I have subscribers from as far as Algeria, Egypt, Russia, Sri Lanka. I am so grateful for the support. Thank you very much. This podcast is for those studying English. It really doesn't matter what level you are in your journey. I am confident you will be able to benefit from these practical tips that I am confident will help you as you study English. Firstly, it cannot be overstated just how important it is to immerse yourself into English or whatever language you are learning. Trust me, I understand how difficult and intimidating this may seem, but it has to be done. The fact of the matter is, English, or any other language for that matter, is very different from the disciplines we learn at school such as math, science, etc. Although math is a very practical subject which requires much practice, it's not as widely used as English is. English is more than a subject. It is a language, so that means it is a means of communication, and there is no getting around using it at every stage, especially if you are living in an English-speaking country as you study English. There are two ways you can look at this. You can either be annoyed at how often you need to face the challenge of speaking the language, or you may be grateful for the tremendous opportunities you get to challenge yourself and use the language. Immersing yourself is extremely crucial. So, how do you immerse yourself? Well, thankfully, at this present moment, there are extensive resources available at your fingertips. I don't think there have been any other time where such a vast array of resources existed for language learners. As I have mentioned in previous videos, there are podcasts like this one. There is music, several different types. You just need to choose what you like. There are also interesting movies and TV shows you can watch. There are textbooks and novels you can challenge yourself to read. And of course, there are several technology-like apps which facilitate live conversation with natives. Another amazing thing is that these resources do really cost much. In fact, many of them are free once you have a reliable internet connection. I just want to touch on a few benefits that can be derived from fully immersing yourself in English. Before I really get into the practical tips I want to share with you today. As I said, full immersion can be very intimidating, especially at the start. You may find your brain rebelling or blocking out what you are trying to listen, especially when you hear words or phrases you don't understand. You may get thrown off at times as well. But immersing yourself into English by listening English conversations in movies or podcasts or whatever it is you listen. The aim is not always to be able to understand the equivalent of what you hear in your own native language. Sometimes, especially at first, you will not be able to fully grasp what is being said or how it translates in your native language. That is okay. What is important is you get the chance to practice listening and speaking how the language is actually spoken in a natural environment. You get the chance to listen and reproduce the patterns and rhythms native speakers use, which helps you become more fluent. This also helps you better understand the culture of native English speakers. Don't take this for granted. But as you study English, especially if you study from textbooks, you may learn many words or phrases that no one really uses or says. And maybe that is the same as studying many other languages. But when you study by immersing yourself and listening to real English conversations, you learn useful popular phrases and why people talk the way they do. But one of the most important benefits of full immersion is the likelihood for English, or the language you are learning, to become second nature to you. Think about your life as a complete continuum. Have you ever had an experience where you heard a new vocabulary used in a particular setting and you are able to pick up on the meaning easily just because you understand the context in which it is being used? How many English words or phrases have you learned from studying in a formal way, compared to those you have learned from watching TV and listening to English podcasts? Once you hear enough English, you start understanding the words or phrases naturally because you are being exposed to the context and situation in which the language is being spoken. And this way, you are not learning by using the treacherous method of translating every single thing you hear or see in your native language in order to understand. The truth is, not everything can be translated word for word. and translating word for word may cause you to miss out on understanding some important cultural references you may need to pay attention to in order to fully grasp what is being communicated. Full immersion will help you adopt English into your subconscious, and you will start even thinking in English. This also helps you to have an automatic response to English questions, because you have gotten so used to the patterns, it is easy to replicate. So this is why I cannot stress enough just important and useful it is to fully immerse yourself in English. Don't worry if it seems hard at first. And with the very interesting and fun contents on TV and YouTube, you will be intrigued to stick around and listen for more, trust me. Okay, so let's get into my tips for today. Here are 4 practical tips that will be a game changer in improving your fluency. The first one is learning and practicing common phrases. This is always a good place to start. Try to understand and learn how to use many of the most common English phrases. This will empower you to have even basic conversations with natives and learn even more common phrases. Remember, not all the phrases learned from your textbook are natural ways of speaking, so pay attention to real-life conversations and how natives use these phrases. It's also useful to keep an inventory of these phrases and increase them as you go along. You may also find that you will learn different ways of saying the same thing, which is important. It's never wise to only study one way of communicating any one thing. That puts you in a box and severely restricts you from further communication. Another important tip is practicing speaking English using the natural rhythm and flow used by natives. Listening to real-life English conversations can help greatly in this area. I would encourage you, however, to focus on listening to podcasts and other natural settings where English is spoken, instead of television shows like dramas and movies. Television shows and movies tend to utilize dramatic conversation for a dramatic effect. So, what happens is that some basic phrases and words are sometimes overemphasized for the sole purpose of creating drama for the viewers. This is not often a replica of the pattern in which people speak in natural conversations. However, some TV programs like reality television shows and news broadcasts may capture those natural conversations, especially when natives are interviewed by the news channels. Interview segments such as those on podcasts and even live conversation with natives are better sources to help you practice and replicate the rhythm of English spoken naturally. There are 2 other things that may be useful in practicing the natural rhythm of spoken English. 1. Work on your pronunciation as well. Like with many other languages, a simple mispronunciation can cause somewhat major miscommunication. If you fail to pronounce some words incorrectly, sometimes people will not be able to understand what you are saying or trying to say. And I've created a video on pronunciation, so please check it out for more in-depth pronunciation. But a useful tip that I always share is this: speak slowly. Trust me, this is a useful way to better enunciate. Fluency doesn't mean rushing to speak. This may be more difficult for some native of other languages which are spoken quickly, but just practice speaking a little slower, especially if you struggle with pronunciation. And the next thing is this: try to study the other physical mannerisms that natives use when speaking. Remember, communication far exceeds spoken words to also include facial expressions and other actions which accompany speech. It may be helpful to understand clearly how and in what context these are used and replicate where possible. The next tip is to practice and use contractions. I think, like with many other languages, many native English speakers use a lot of contractions in natural speech. Contractions are a shortened way of saying something. So, for example, instead of saying "let us do it," we often say "let's do it." This is understandable because as human beings we are always seeking an easier way of doing everything, even communication. So again, you may learn very standard English initially, especially from textbooks, but you will find that contractions are used more than those standardized expressions. What is also common, especially recently, is the adoption of expressions and even slangs into standard speech. While many slangs are still not accepted in formal settings, it is still important to learn them, as you will not always be speaking in a formal settings, so practice for those times. But without a doubt, common idioms have been normalized into formal speech as well as everyday speech, so look out for those. Here are a few common ones. Call it a day. This means to finish something or to accept that something is finished. Go for it. This means to attempt to do something, especially something that seems challenging. Bite the dust. This means to die or fail. Hit the sack means to go to sleep. Cut him some slack. This means to refrain from criticizing some even when they deserve such criticisms. And the final tip for today is simple. Use English fillers when you get stuck. In other words, instead of saying the filler words from your native language, try to learn the English ones and use them when needed. I made another video about this, including some of the most common English fillers so please check that if you are interested. And that is it. Some tips I guarantee will help with your fluency. Remember, for other useful tips, please stick around and check out my other videos and share with me what your experiences have been as someone studying English. I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you very much. Well, that is it for today. I hope to see you again soon.